We're back. It's match day in Prague for the Champions League clash between Arsenal and Slavia Prague. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is indeed the Arsenal News Show. You join me here from a hotel room in Prague ahead of Arsenal's game against Slavia Prague in the UEFA Champions League. It's good to be back. It feels a really long time since I've kind of sat down and chat to camera live and to you listeners as well in the chat box. It's been an awfully long time. Of course, there's not been a live version of this show since Friday. Friday morning. No, not even then. Thursday morning. A pre-recorded show on Friday. We had a pre-recorded show on Saturday. We had the upload, of course, on Sunday, explaining the story of what happened after Burnley, and no show yesterday because I was flying to Prague from London on a 5 to 8 in the morning flight. So, yeah, it's been a long time since sitting here and talking to you all during a live show. So good morning to you. Thank you so much as always for tuning in. It's actually 9 a.m. here in Prague, but it'll be 8 a.m. as always UK time back in the UK, and then wherever, of course, the rest of you happen to be in this wide, wonderful world. But good morning to those of you joining us in the chat. Good morning to Shari and James and Clint. Good morning to Ken. We've got Sir Nicholas and Claire. We've got Paul. We've got Dara. Good morning to you, to Pat, to Scouse Gunnar, to Kevin, to Pat, to Tom. Good morning to Maximius and Stephen and Knowledge. Good morning to Arasilki and Matt G. We've got Mohammed and Jamil and Martin and Norris. Thank you to you all for listening. It is greatly appreciated. And sorry that there's not been a show in the normal sense for a little while. So, yes, but it was quite a crazy weekend. I'm not going to go into loads of it now. You might have questions maybe in part 2 about it. But if you want to kind of learn what happened after the game against Burnley, then please do go and watch the video that I uploaded on Sunday because it explains as much of it in as much detail as feasibly possible. So go and check that one out. But good morning to you all. Thank you so much as always for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. If you could drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show, that would be indeed greatly appreciated. But yes, here in Prague for Arsenal's game in the Champions League. Interesting fixture, of course, and potentially a record-breaking or record-equaling fixture for Arsenal. A clean sheet tonight in the Fortuna Arena will see Arsenal match a record of 8 clean sheets, which has stood since 1903. Quite the incredible run that Arsenal have currently been on. Defensively, they've been faultless. And there is an expectation, of course, of rotation this evening. I think that's fair, not just because of the Champions League opponent or because there's Premier League games at the weekends, but also because of injuries. And we're going to talk about those injuries. We're going to talk about plenty more as well. But I have to say, Prague is a really nice city. I've never been here before. But the architecture, just the whole environment, the places that we've been to so far, the stadium as well. The stadium's really strange. You'll see it in my match day vlog, but there's like shops built into the stadium. There's like a McDonald's, there's I think there's like a supermarket, all kind of built into the outside of the stadium. It's a very strange, different kind of environment than usual for a stadium. But was in there yesterday for Mikel Arteta's press conference ahead of the game today. We also heard from Leandro Trossard as well from that presser too. So lots of reaction to come from that. And we'll kick things off, though, with kind of the other news story that did drop yesterday, and that is that Arsenal's game in the Carabao Cup, the quarter-final against Crystal Palace, has been rescheduled. Arsenal are due to play Crystal Palace on December 23rd. And this obviously is quite frustrating for Arsenal. It's my understanding that they would have preferred the game to have been played on the 16th of December and therefore would have had an extra day's rest. This means that Arsenal will have just one day between their game against Everton, which takes place on Sunday, December 21st, and this League Cup quarter-final game against Crystal Palace on December 21st is the Everton game, and then December 23rd is the Carabao Cup game as well. It was due to be played on the week commencing December 15th, which would have given Arsenal an extra day of rest. But of course, it means that Palace would have had 4 games in 8 days. Not only that, but they can't move the Premier League game, or at least we don't think they can move the Premier League game, because Crystal Palace play on Thursday in the UEFA Conference League. Suggestions are that game won't be moved to the Wednesday to allow then the Everton game to be pushed back, and of course Palace have a game also on that Sunday. They go to Leeds as well, but that Arsenal-Everton game it simply cannot be moved. Realistically, it's not going to be moved because, as mentioned, Palace play on that Thursday, and you never see a Premier League game move to a Saturday when a team has played on that Thursday before that, as Crystal Palace do. So I just can't see how either of these games move. Crystal Palace's game against Leeds, I guess you could argue that the Arsenal game moving to the Saturday is not hindered in any way because Palace play on Thursday, but Arsenal don't. So you could suggest that Arsenal's game will move to Saturday, but I guess we will have to wait and see. But Palace also, of course, have got a game on the Sunday at the moment against Leeds. So it's fair to say that people at the club, in particular, Mikel Arteta, is not particularly happy about this. We'll talk about his specific quotes shortly. But he was in, I would describe, a pretty tense mood, having, I imagine, just found out about the decision, of course, to schedule the game in this manner. Now, there was an open training session at the Shobarulti Training Centre on Monday morning at lunchtime, and a number of reporters were there, like Charles Watts, for instance. I think Simon Collins was there as well, providing updates of who and who wasn't there. Now, Viktor Gyokeres and Kepa were not in attendance. Zubimendi was, but he is suspended for this game, so hasn't travelled as far as I'm aware. But Viktor Gyokeres has not travelled, nor was he in training, and at the moment we don't have too much in the way of information about the specifics of the reasons why, other than that it is a muscular problem that was suffered in the game against Burnley. It's not ideal at all. It's frustrating. It's another blow for Arsenal. And yes, there is a sense that there is a big squad at Arsenal this season, but that's all 3 strikers gone. Jesus out, Havertz out, Gyokeres out. Arsenal don't have a centre forward, natural centre forward at the moment, other than Andre Harriman Anus, who made his debut as a 17-year-old against Brighton last week. It is a very frustrating period, I think, for Arteta. He's obviously going to be feeling the pressure, of course, of the games. Now, Arsenal do have the benefit that the international break comes after the game at Sunderland, where there is hope that the likes of Odegaard, Madueke, Havertz could return after the international break. Whether or not it will be for the Tottenham game, we don't yet know, nor do we know the details and the finer kind of explanation of how long, if it is a long period of time, that Viktor Gyokeres will be out for. So let's talk about that press conference. Mikel Arteta speaking yesterday with us at the Fortuna Arena in Prague, and was asked, of course, for an update on the latest player fitness. And he said, on Gyokeres, he's definitely not available. He hasn't trained today. We need to do some more tests and scans in the next few days to understand the extent of the injury, but he's not available. And there was further questions a little bit later on Viktor. And Charlie Wyatt from The Sun asked about him mentally and was like, how is he doing? Because obviously he must be gutted. He's just battled through, started to make a difference, and now he's injured. And he said, well, obviously he was very disappointed after the match with what he felt. But this is part of football at the end. If you expect a linear line, everything going up, it's not going to happen. If he's got something, he's going to have to deal with it. We will help him to do that. As you said, he was in a really good moment, in really good form. He's a very important player for the team, but tomorrow we don't have him, and that is it. Art Deroche did ask Arteta what the specifics of the injury were, but he just said, I'll leave that with the doctors. They will explain. I don't want to talk anymore. We are here to talk about tomorrow's match, and the players that are available we'll see in the next week or so. So Of course, we will hear more about that situation as and when it turns around in the coming days, as Mikel Arteta will have a press conference ahead of the game against, of course, Sunderland. And so there'll be a press conference on Friday where he will be asked questions yet again about what to expect from that and the latest on any injuries there as well. But it's not an ideal situation. But injuries, we suffered 27 last season and it had a really detrimental impact on Arsenal's capacity to win games. When you've got 3 centre forwards, all of them out, it's not an ideal situation at all. So injuries happen, and when you've invested as much in the squad as we have, of course, there's less kind of call to complain or moan about injuries. But when you've lost every single one of your centre forwards and you've got 3 of them all worth well over 40 million quid, there is definitely a reason that you can moan about injuries, especially how they happen in kind of specific positions and kind of the same positions. And Sam Dean asked the question about kind of why injuries seem to happen in one area of the squad so frequently. Last season, we had a period where loads of defenders were injured. There were other times where midfielders were injured. And now there's a period again where centre forwards are injured. And Arteta said, well, we've looked at everything. Obviously, we have 4 knee injuries, Gabi Jesus, Kai, Madueke, Martin, which is very, very unusual, all of them long term. And then we have some muscular injuries with other players, which can happen, and every club is having. I think it's very unusual to have that many players in the front line with the issues. We have to face it. We've been facing it in a brilliant way, and we'll continue like this. It is, it's mad. It is mad. I mean, Mikel Merino, obviously, I expect will probably come into the centre forward position tonight, and will, of course, be hoping to be a bit better than he was at Burnley. That's my expectation. That's who I think will start. It's not who I personally would choose to start. I will come on to that in a little bit. But yeah, Marino is not anywhere close to as good as our other options at centre forward. And Arsenal, I imagine, will suffer as a result of that. But hopefully we have a centre forward available for the weekend's game against Sunderland. Continuing into the press conference, though, onto some of the other themes, he did respond to the Carabao Cup fixture being rescheduled. And he was very blunt, honest, and straight to the point on this and said, hopefully they will move the Premier League match because to play this to this date doesn't make any sense, obviously. So we will now decide the date. I'm sure they will change the Premier League date as well. He's talking about the Everton game. The problem with that is obviously that a lot of people have already booked journeys to Everton. Fans have already booked travel to Everton. And with it only, it's just over a month away, that trip to Everton. Certainly I've booked travel for that game already, as we book things in advance, of course, with the problems with the expense of trains in this country. And we talk about kind of the welfare of players and supporters. And you could argue that a lot of people having already travelled or booked travel to Everton, it could leave them somewhat out of pocket if they need to find different ways of making the game. But I absolutely agree, in a footballing sense, that game has to move to Saturday. It absolutely has to move to Saturday. Arsenal cannot play Sunday, Tuesday. And the games around that, Arsenal play on the Saturday the week before that. So they play Wolves on Saturday, December 13th. Arsenal don't have a midweek game as far as I'm aware that week, unless there's something I'm missing. But I don't think they have a midweek game. So surely they will either move that Everton game to Saturday or Friday. Surely they will. How the scheduling can have Arsenal have a week break and then play 2 games in 3 days wouldn't make any sense. So that Everton game will surely have to move to either the Friday or the Saturday, because to make Arsenal play that game on the Sunday, it just makes absolutely zero sense. Absolutely zero sense. So I guess we will see what happens. If they don't move it, then serious questions need to be asked about. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. The good news, of course, with that game is that the expectation is that Odegaard, Madueke, Havertz, maybe Jesus could be back by that date. So we might have extra players. We might have more depth. We might have more options, but that's not guaranteed at this stage either. He was asked for further questions about whether or not they'd made a request to the Premier League to have the game moved. And he says, I leave that to the club. I think we're very clear what was the best thing, the most logical date to play. They bring a different date, so I'm sure we'll have to adapt to that. And then Ed Aarons asked, if you do have to play it, do you think it's the sort of thing that could really disadvantage you for the long run over the course of a season because you have 2 games in 3 days? And he says, I think, as I said earlier, I'm sure we will apply the principles of the first of all the players and then the supporters and then the times that we need to have equality and the same chances for every club. So hopefully it will be fair. Further questions. Isan Khan of the Mail asked, you guys obviously wanted the game on December 16th and now it's December 23rd. Even though with the squad depth that you've got at Arsenal, how concerning is it, despite the schedule and the fixtures, that you could potentially be forced to play 2 in 3 days? Does it not concern you despite having that depth? And he said, we have 7 players out. So I don't know what depth we're talking about now because we're missing a lot of players in the forward line. If we continue to do that every 3 days, we want respecting again. What we discussed previously, that in our opinion, it's the most important part. Obviously, there's a frustration in Arteta. And I can tell you that, there are times where I sit in a press conference room and the vibe of how Mikel is kind of feeling and what his demeanor is. And almost immediately, you could tell he was not in the most pleasing of moods, let's say. It was quite clear from the off. There were some questions where he smiled and he laughed, and that's good. And, we tried to open him up a bit, but there was a clear sense that he was not happy at all with the situation. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming it's because of the situation. It could be a million other things, but it was evident that he wasn't in the best of moods for the game. That's for sure. In terms of what I asked, so there was a lot of questions on those 2 things. I was going to ask about kind of the fixture, but it'd already been asked about a lot, so I didn't feel like I needed to. So I asked about the Declan Rice situation because Declan Rice is 1 suspension away from a yellow card suspension. Is 1 yellow card away from like that 1-match ban, and of course that would be against Bayern at home in the next round of the league phase. I said he's obviously a player that's so vital to how you play, and your next Champions League game is Bayern at home. How much is that figuring into the gamble of selecting Declan for the match? And he says it comes as well with the situation with Zubi. We know that Zubi was on 2 yellows as well. That's the competition. At some point, you might miss players in crucial games. Obviously, we're going to try and avoid that as much as possible, but it's part of the competition. And he is right. But would I risk Declan Rice for this game? I don't know. I've really been toiling with it. I've really been going back and forth about whether or not I would. And my honest answer is I don't think I would. I don't think I would risk him for this game at all. So I wouldn't personally start Declan in this game. I don't think I'd risk it. I think he's so important for the game against Bayern that I wouldn't be risking him. And you can give him a rest, of course, for the weekend's game against Sunderland as well. So it's a double benefit by not playing him. And then, of course, in Zubi's place, we expect to be Christian Nørgaard. And so I asked about Christian, and I said he's obviously had restricted time because of his injury at the start of the season and how consistent Zubimendi has been. He might get an opportunity tomorrow. What has he been like? He's an experienced player, obviously a really valuable part of your squad. What's his experience been so early in his career at Arsenal? And he said, exceptional. I knew very clearly the role that he was going to have while he was on the team. He was exactly doing that. I think he was in a really good moment before he got injured. Then it took him a while again, as is normal, to get up to speed. Now he's having some more minutes and he's available for tomorrow. So Christian Nørgaard, we expect to be involved in today's game this evening against Slavia Prague. I imagine we'll probably be starting in a number 6 role. So let's wait and see if that happens. But yes, as I said, Arteta was very good on the topics. He wasn't in the best of moods, but he answered the questions, answered our thoughts on a lot of these aspects of the game. But naturally, there is obviously some frustrations, I think, about particularly the injuries and also the situation regarding the Palace fixture. being changed as well, which is obviously a bit of a frustration. Just very quickly on Leandro Trossard, and specifically kind of around what we spoke about. He was asked about the fixture schedule and kind of the impact that has on players. And is it frustrating? He says, yeah, indeed, I would say so. Obviously, it is up to the people who make the calendar at the start of the year. I think they should know that these kind of things can happen. And with a lot of players already mentioning that there are a lot of games, I think they should. We are now in this space where it hasn't been. We need to deal with it at this point, and hopefully we can make the best out of it. And then he was asked again, what about the quality? Will the quality of the game be affected? Sam Dean said, do you think the game will just be rubbish? Because obviously there's so little time between matches. And he says, that's up to us, obviously, because we want to win every game and we're going to try to win the game as well. We want to get further in the cup. It's not ideal, definitely, but it's up to the players to recover well and use every tool there is to be ready to play the game. He was also asked about his future and potentially for staying beyond 2027, and he expressed the desire to do such that he would like to extend beyond 2027. He's very happy at Arsenal. He loves playing for the club. He believes he can win things here, and so he seems to be keen on extending his deal beyond 2027. So he's been really important for Arsenal this season. No matter what you think about Leandro Trossard overall, or whether his future should be at Arsenal or what, nobody can debate really how important he has been. He's scored some really big goals in big moments, and he's been key. And at the moment, he is our starting left winger, and he is our best left winger at the moment. Gabriel Martinelli is injured. Odegaard is injured, so Eza can't play there. He is the best option, and probably will start again tonight. Right, we're going to go to part two, which is going to be a quick preview ahead of tonight's game against Slavia Prague, right after this. Now, Viktor Gyokeres, of course, is missing for tonight's game, but I didn't have time to change the image on the slide. So he's there as a mascot for this particular team. But this is how I would set up for tonight's game against Slavia Prague in the Champions League. Of course, Kepa isn't and hasn't been playing in the Champions League, so David Raya we expect to start. I'd personally go with Jurriën Timber. You can bring on Ben White later in the game if need be, but I'd personally go with Jurriën Timber for an away fixture. Tricky game. He's going to be important. Mosquera at right-sided centre half. Gabriel on the left-hand side. Hincapié at left-back. Norgard in the number 6. Eza and Nwaneri as attacking 8s together. Saka on the right. Trossard on the left. And Andre Harriman Anous as our centre-forward option. I don't know if he's travelled because I didn't see any images of him getting on the flight. And I'm just kind of thinking, and I know a lot of you in the chat box are saying, this guy's going to start, this guy's going to start. This is my team. This isn't a predicted 11. This is my team. This is what I would personally go for in this particular fixture. Should add and point that out. It's just who I personally would start in this game and how I would change the team. And while, Dennis, you might point out that the midfield is quite lightweight, well, we started the game against Brighton with Norgard and Marino playing in midfield, and they were frankly ran through. The midfield was overturned, and we lacked, I think, a lot more mobility. And so I have no issue with playing Eza and Nwaneri in this game either. On top of that, I think that you can rest one of the two centre-halves. I think Saliba is in line for more of a rest, perhaps, than Gabriel is. Of course, there were some rumours about potentially a kind of an injury before Burnley. He played and he looked fine. But that, for me, is the team. That's what I would go for. Marino gives us something coming off the bench later on in the game, potentially for the centre-forward position. You could bring him on midfield as well. There are options. There are choices. And, we're all going to have opinions. So this is what I would go for in the game. You could then move Hincapié to left centre-half and bring on Lewis Skelly for the second half as well. So, yeah, I think for me, this is what I would have gone for. I don't think this will be the team. If you're asking me what I think the team will be, I think it'll be Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly, Norgard, Rice, Nwaneri, I think will be the midfield, and then Saka, Marino, Trossard. That's what I think it will be. That's what I think he will choose. So that's my thinking of what it will be, but this is what I would personally choose for the game. So scorelines, what predictions, what do you think is going to be the score in this game? Let me know in the chat box. There's over 1,000 of you tuning in, by the way. Thank you so much for so many of you listening. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We do these shows every single morning, 8 a.m. UK time. From a personal point of view, I think I'm going to go with a clean sheet. I think it's got to be a clean sheet, isn't it? Of course, we've been predicting that we might see goals conceded for ages, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Mohammed says 3-0 to the Arsenal. Black Shine says 2-0 to the Arsenal. Dara also saying 2-0. Kirill says 3-1. Umair says 2-0 Arsenal. Shanito says 1-0 to the Arsenal. Soup says 4-0. Claire says 2-0 Saka and Hincapie. Most importantly, no more fudging injuries. Matt says 2-0 to the Arsenal as well. D's going 3-0. Ada's going 2-0. Eddie says 0-0. Kingley says 2-0 to the Arsenal. So does Knowledge. So does Oslo. So does SJH as well. And Loss says 3-0. But Ipung says 2-1 to, I imagine, Arsenal. I hope Arsenal. Difficult when we do away games because people rarely distinguish between the two sides in their scoreline predictions. But it's going to be a tougher game. I don't think they've lost at home all season, have Slavia Prague. So it's worth thinking about that and the challenge that is, of course, ahead. I did look through their squad. I'll be very honest. I don't recognise anyone in their team, but there is plenty to be intrigued about when it comes to this particular game. Right, let's go to part 3. Your questions and more right after this. Right, this is part 3 of today's show, which is why we're back to the red background. But of course, it's also the part of the show where we're going to be tackling some of your questions. So if you've indeed got some questions, now is the time to ask them. Drop them into the chat box. Capital Q helps them stand out a lot more. So let's go through as many of them as we can in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Benny says the Bayern game is not more important than this game. We have to take one game at a time. I do tend to agree in the context of kind of, you want to pick up the points, and the Bayern game isn't necessarily going to stop Arsenal from qualifying in the top 8. This game could arguably have a bigger impact on Arsenal not qualifying in the top 8 of the league phase. So I agree to an extent, but I also think that the Bayern game is really important from an Arsenal kind of confidence, momentum, statement point of view. So I think there's arguments for both sides on this particular regard. Soup says they haven't lost against anyone, but they haven't played anyone like us. Very worth pointing out. James says, I was in Prague a few months back for a mate stag do. Let's hope you don't come back with an awkward piercing also. Oh, no, James. Goodness gracious. Don't tell us where it was. I don't think we need to know. Amir says, Tom, does the anti-Arsenal bias ever come up when you get together with other journalists at press conferences? No, I don't think I've ever got into a debate with anybody in the pack about Arsenal in the way that I see kind of it talked in on a broadcast level at times. So no, it hasn't at all. Dennis says, thank God there is an... Oh, by the way, just on this point, Ed the other day got like loads of backlash for like a tweet that he put out, which kind of included like a bit of a quote of Arteta used. Me and him are not subscribed to Twitter. We don't want to be the guys giving Elon Musk money. And the quote kind of gets cut off because he runs out of characters. He got set upon by so many Arsenal fans because there's such a paranoia around Arsenal at the moment that people just assume that everything, especially from like a journalistic point of view, anyone putting out a quote, anyone putting out a story, people are so quick to jump on it these days. So quick to jump on it. So I know that there's kind of a feeling, a sense that we want to defend the club, a sense that we want to, or we think that everybody is against us. Let me tell you, that's not the case. Not everybody is. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I just thought that was a great example of like, I feel like the siege mentality tipping slightly over the edge and making some mistakes. And just said, are you going to the game? Of course, I'm working. I'll be working there. I'll be watching it, writing about it, talking about it. Chadwin says, Tom, let's get the win, but Miles Lewis together with Norgard and Eza. Lost says Olympiacos was unbeaten also before we played them too. You're absolutely right. Tom says, Tom, do you think with this fixture scheduling, would you like to see some teams playing in Europe not being in the CC? Give them a Carabao Cup. Give them a UEFA Conference League place. The new winner each year keeps it fresh and worth winning. The team that wins the Carabao Cup does get that UEFA Conference League place. But would I like to see the teams that are in Europe not involved in the Carabao Cup? It's a good question. I think that would obviously bring down the legitimacy of the competition. It would be seen a little bit more like the EFL trophy, but for teams that aren't in Europe. But I see where you're coming from, Tom. I don't think it's a terrible suggestion, but I don't think it would ever happen. And I think there would be a lot of pushback on that, certainly. I think there'd be a lot of support for it actually as well, but I can't see it happening. Carl says, Tom, any truth in the rumor that Raya has requested to work from home next few matches? He potentially could, couldn't he? US Arsenal fan says, is Raya working from home today? He hasn't seen a shot on target since that Nketiah header. And that Nketiah header, by the way, I don't know how that counts as a shot on target. It barely moved. It barely moved towards goal. I think that's a real stretch to suggest that's a shot on target. Jack says, if Arteta was to win the league, do you think he would want to stay or move on? Oh, he'd want to stay. He's very committed to Arsenal and he wants Arsenal to become a dominant serial title-winning force, and he would certainly stay. Raj says, Mikel expressed an option to play Ethan as a forward. Could this be an option? Maybe, but I doubt it will see that in this game. Slightly Strange John says, would it not make sense to play Rice and secure the 3 points here? Then we have probably need to beat the two easier teams to finish in the top 8. No need to think too much about Bayern or Inter. It's definitely a fair argument, as pointed out before. You know, you've got to try and get these 3 points, really important ones. Shrunita says, let's face it, Rice is going to start. I don't know why, but I'm confident of a comprehensive victory against Sunderland this weekend, maybe like a 3-0. Am I deluded? I don't think you're deluded. No, I think Arsenal have been very, very good, so why not? DT Drapes says, I hope that we get to see shots of Rosicky and Arteta together before and after the match. What a legend. Arteta was asked about Rosicky in the press conference and asked whether or not, he was asked by a Czech journalist whether he was going to be seeing him. And he says, I will try to see him. We had a great time together. I always said it. Thomas is one of my favourite players. He's the one that I play with, and if we have the chance tomorrow, he's going. If he's available, we will see each other, give each other a hug, and talk a bit about football. So, yeah, and of course, it was interesting because Rosicky was linked quite heavily with the sporting director role at Arsenal in the summer before Andrea Berta, or earlier in the year before Andrea Berta was appointed. So there is that link more recently between Arsenal and Rosicky. Rosicky is a personal favourite of mine. Before Santi Cazorla, he was probably my favourite Arsenal player. RGB says, hi, Tom. What result are you looking for in the City-Liverpool game? Personally, I want a feisty draw. Yeah, I think you've got it absolutely spot on. Red cards, injuries, feisty draw between the two. Claire says, what detergent did the club use to wash the kits? No idea. You'll have to ask the kit man, mate. Abby says, Tom, why are you sitting next to a Spurs trophy cabinet? It's a good question. Good question. For those listening on audio, it's an empty cabinet. Chadwin says, Tom, did you see the comparison between Rice and Caicedo? Rice is more complete. Oh, yeah, I think Rice is the better player. I don't think it's even a debate, to be honest. I don't think it's a debate at all. He's a good player, Caicedo, a very good player, but for me, he's not world class. I think Rice is. Reese says, a bit early, but how much do you hate the upcoming international breaks? I don't hate them anymore. I don't hate international breaks anymore. I know that I used to absolutely despise them. But working in this business, I've learned to really embrace them. They give me a break. They give you a break. They give us a break. They give some players a break. I've learned to really embrace the international breaks. I almost look forward to them sometimes because when the games are thick and fast, and when I've had a week like I've had this week with what happened on the way home from Burnley, seeing my family for like 4 hours, getting on a flight on Sunday, getting a hotel then Sunday evening before flying early on Monday, I have learned to enjoy the international breaks. So actually I've learned, I do appreciate those international breaks more than I did before. Chris says, with all these injuries at the top of the pitch, could we offer a pay-as-you-play contract to Oxlade-Chamberlain? I don't think so. Nor are the club looking to do that. He was asked as well about Oxlade-Chamberlain yesterday, and he said he's a top character. He's one of the best characters I've met in football. If we can help him, we can give him the space for him to get up to speed and have the capacity to find a club. It's a joy. The boys will learn from him. I had the privilege of playing with him, and if he's around, he'll be a really good role model to have around the team. I found it, I'm interested to see if he ever trains with the first team because I found it a little odd at first that he was training with the youth team. I feel as though a player of his kind of age, experience, level of quality, still would probably be able to be training with the first team. It might be because it was a Champions League week, but interesting that he was training with the youth team. And I'll be interested to see if that continues. I think it's more interesting if he stays with the youth team while he's with Arsenal training, and he doesn't do any work with the senior team. That would be very interesting indeed. Gaza, we don't have a timeline on Martinelli, but hopefully after the international break. I think that's the feeling. Paul says, I'd rather we start the season early and play all the Carabao Cup rounds and then play the final instead of the Community Shield. Lucas says, hi, Tom. Hope you're well after the weekend. If Arsenal keep a clean sheet tonight, I believe that we're breaking a record that has stood for over 100. We'll be equaling a record, I think, that has stood for over 100 years. 122 years. We'll be matching a record set in 1903. Chris says Rice should not play. Remember, Roy Keane missed United's 1999 Champions League final because of a silly cumulative yellow card. The buying game is too important to risk. It's an interesting question, actually, and I'm going to put it to you in terms of a poll in the chat box. What is the more important game? Slavia Prague or Bayern? That's my question. And I think it's a good question because there's arguments for both. You could say that if Arsenal, and it's not about what's more important to win, that's not the question. What's more important in general, because Slavia Prague's the next game, if Arsenal can win, if Arsenal beat every team they play other than Bayern and Inter, they'll still finish in the top 8. That will happen. It's just how it works in terms of the numbers you need to get into those certain positions in the league phase. But if, say, you drop Rice here, you draw against Slavia Prague because you're focusing on trying to beat Bayern, that could have more detrimental impacts. At the same time, beat Bayern, and you've made a big statement, and you could end up potentially finishing top of the table as well. So it's something to keep in mind, definitely. Lucas says, how much pressure is Arteta under to win trophies? Loads. Christian says, are you hopeful of Havertz coming back and playing? Of course I'm hopeful of him coming back and playing. I don't know when, but I'm hopeful of him coming back and playing. Steve says, this time around, Arsenal could do with an international break. It gives our players who are injured a greater chance to recover. Absolutely. Claire says, the most important game is always the next game. Franklin says, I'd take a draw against Bayern because it's sandwiched between Spurs and Chelsea. Angus says, I will say Slavia because you want to get the momentum going as well. Nifty says the most important game should always be the next game. But Soup says psychologically, Bayern is more important. Shawnita says Slavia Prague is more important, 3 points all day long. But he says it's mad comparing a final to just the Bayern game. I do agree with that. I don't think that's direct comparison, but yellow card accumulation certainly worth it for the context as well. And trading answers, if we don't win this game, it does put increasingly more pressure on the Bayern match as well. Exactly. Eddie says, first time I've ever wanted an international break to come. Get at least a draw today and a classic 1-0 to the Arsenal on the weekend, please. I mean, I think Arsenal should be targeting a win today. I don't think a draw is a good result today. I think a win is absolutely the minimum expectation. Vincent says, Slavia game will put us securely closer to the next round, and then we can play the second team in the last games of the competition as well. And Paul says the Bayern game will be a better barometer of if we've really progressed. I don't know if it will be, to be honest, because it is sandwiched between those games between Spurs and Chelsea. The squad has lost so many players. We don't know how many of them will be back for that game, if any. So I don't know if it is going to be a good barometer for Arsenal because of the context around the game, more than anything else. I don't know if it's going to be affected more so by that. We won't then be able to get a better idea. Just from the over 100 of you that have already voted on that poll, it is 50-50 right now. 50-50 split in terms of what's the more important game. So clearly a question worth asking because it's caused quite the level of division amongst you all in the chat. Christian says, is there benefits of placing top 8 or first in the group stage? Yes, the higher that you finish up the group phase, the more priority you have when it comes to getting the home tie of the knockout rounds in the second leg. So if a team that finishes first plays a team that finishes 8th, the team that finished first will definitely have their home leg of the home leg in the second leg. If you are 16th and you play a team that finished 22nd in the knockout phase, you will get the home leg in the second leg. So yes, that is the benefit of finishing higher up the table. And that's why Arsenal will want to do that. Shanita says, who are the people talking about a draw? Guys, we are talking about a break record here, clean sheet and 3 points. The King K-Man says, with the way that our players get injured in the turns, do you think some of the players may never get to play together? I have no idea. It's mad how the reality of Arsenal's injury records. It's mad also how people are so conspiratorial about it without really thinking. It's just bad luck. And obviously a combination of the fixture schedule as well. But the bad luck has been horrendous for us. Amaral Gunner says, hold on. Aren't we supposed to have a better squad? Injuries will happen. We have to get on with it. They will. But it is absolutely still worth pointing out that the volume of injuries in specific areas can have a really detrimental impact on your team, on your capacity to win games, on your capacity to compete. The bigger squad helps us if we have kind of which tends to happen more so, injuries spread across the team's positions. But Arsenal are having injuries happen so significantly in specific areas of the pitch, which is creating more problems that squad size is just simply not going to be able to fix. Samuel says, I voted Prague because we need to win it, but mentally beating Bayern would be absolutely massive, both their current team and form and their record, of course, against us. Thomas says, all teams have injuries. There's not enough rest in modern football. All teams do have injuries, but as proven last season, Arsenal had more than any other in terms of the 27 separate injuries that they suffered. Spurs had another really bad season with injuries as well in terms of the length that players were missing for. They finished 17th. Arsenal finished second. So even with injuries, Arsenal have shown that they are, without question, capable of dealing with injuries. But when it comes to winning stuff and dealing with injuries, that's still what we have to overcome this season. Martin says, we've got 7 attackers and 5 of them are out at the moment. That kind of shows you the reality of the situation. Canusa, it's great to have you back, Tom. Thank you, mate. Chris says, we have... Do I keep saying tomorrow? I keep saying tomorrow, don't I? I mean tonight. I'm so tired. Barely had any sleep these last few days. Chris says, we have enough players to play in midfield against Slavia, MLS, Marino, White, who played a... White is not going to play in midfield. Again, I can still... In 2025, I still can't believe that some people still talk about Ben White playing in midfield. It's not going to happen. It never should happen, and it won't happen. So I don't need to worry about it, I guess. Geeks of Muckleby says, hope we get Miles Lewis-Skelly in midfield. I'd be very surprised if we see that. Shanita says, Tom, the day that we concede a goal, there will be celebrations by rival fans all over social media. They are rattled seeing the fan base so united for the first time in so many years. It is amazing seeing Arsenal and the fans, 99% of them now, so united behind what Arsenal are doing. There's a very small, loud minority that are still shouting for the heavens about how bad the manager, the players, whatever are. I think the evidence is on our screens every single week, right in front of our eyes for those in the grounds. And it's a great place to be right now. Arsenal is a great club to support right now. And long may that continue. Gunnar says, Tom, I was hoping Xhaka would get sent off. I don't want him playing against us. Instead, he scored for Sunderland, of course, against Everton. So that reunion happens on the weekend. Callum says, let's not feel sorry for ourselves. Be positive. We at the moment still have more quality in the 11 and the bench than most with the injuries that we have. Absolutely. Eddie says, aren't they unbeaten at home and don't have any injuries? It's really scary and crazy to think it won't be that easy. It's not going to be an easy game tonight. It's not going to be an easy game at all. And we shouldn't forget that. And if Arsenal get a win tonight, it will be an impressive result, definitely. Right. I think we're going to end the show there. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's good to be back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for indulging in my thoughts today. I'll be back with you here live tomorrow morning. I'm not leaving till later in the evening to return to the UK from the Czech Republic, Czechia these days. So I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to the game. And of course, you'll be able to get some reaction in tomorrow's paper in the Mirror. So make sure you check that one out. But there's also a lot of big games going on. In fact, I should probably, before I wrap up, run you through what all the other Champions League games are, because there is in particular quite a big one this evening. So Arsenal are one of the 2 early kickoffs, worth remembering that, 5:45 UK time, alongside Napoli, Eintracht Frankfurt. Atletico Madrid are the first of the later games, 8 p.m. UK time. Atletico taking on Union Saint-Gilloise. Liverpool host Real Madrid. Big game. Trent Alexander-Arnold returns to Anfield. Spurs take on Copenhagen. Olympiacos host PSV. Juventus host Sporting. PSG take on Bayern. Probably two of the three, including us, best teams in Europe at the moment, facing one another. Bodeglimt playing Monaco. They are all of tonight's games. Tomorrow is Paphos Villarreal, Karabag Chelsea, City Dortmund, Newcastle Athletic Club, Ajax Galatasaray, Club Brugge Barcelona, Benfica Leverkusen, Inter Kairat, and Marseille Atalanta. They are all of this week's Champions League fixtures. Big games, exciting times. Looking forward to seeing the game tonight. You can get all of course, the updates from the game. If you're unable to watch it for whatever reason, we'll have a live blog running on the football.london website and reaction to it over there and in the Mirror tomorrow morning as well. If you want to read some information, of course, about Mikel Arteta's press conference, you can do so by picking up a copy of the Mirror again today as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.